Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Board of Selectmen called to order April 27th, 6 p.m., 2020. I'm going to take a roll call of the Selectmen. Sheila,
Here.
Pat,
Here.
Ed,
Here.
Mike.
I'm here.
We're all present. How about Barbara? You want to call your?
I will open the meeting, Alan,
Yes.
and do the head count, literally. Grace Adams,
Yes, here.
John Dykstra,
Here.
Dan Baird,
Here.
David Betsis,
Here.
Alan Evelyn,
Here.
David James,
Here.
Kai Leffler,
Here.
Dimitri Michaud, not here. Michelle Powell, Stedman Seavey,
Here.
and Steve Turner.
Here.
And before we start the meeting, if I could, I would like to have someone make a motion to accept Steve's minutes of the last meeting, please.
So moved.
So move.
So moved by
David James.
David James, moved and seconded by,
John Dykstra.
okay, all in favor, if you'd raise your hands, please.
We have to do the vote.
We
by
have
roll
to
call.
do it, okay.
Okay.
All right, we'll start with Michelle up in the corner. Michelle Powell. Hi,
Michelle for 200.
Grace Adams,
Yes.
John Dykstra.
Aye.
Stedman Seavey,
Aye.
David James,
Aye.
Dan Baird,
Yes.
Alan Evelyn,
Aye.
Steve Turner,
Aye.
and David Betsis.
Aye.
Thank you all. It has been approved unanimously. I approve.
And Dimitri just let me know that he's finishing a call and he'll be jumping on with us.
Okay,
Good.
thank
Okey-doke.
you.
You all set, Barbara?
I am, thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is a virtual Board of Selectmen and Budget Committee meeting. We are using the Zoom conferencing format. The agenda on the town's website has the information needed for the public to participate by Zoom conferencing, format or telephone. If you wish to participate through Zoom, you can join Zoom meeting. The webinar ID number is 936-5605-2979. If you wish to make a public comment and speak on an agenda item, please raise your hand feature by clicking the participants on your computer screen. The moderator will be notified and will identify you when it's your turn to comment. Item 2, discuss the FY21 budget. I'm going to pass this over to Laurie.
So everyone on Friday should have received information relative to the budget. So I didn't spend time going over the entire budget again. And as you remember, where we left off in the past was we were about to view capital. So if people have specific capital requests or questions about any of the capital expenditures, we have, I think, the department directors available to answer those questions. So certainly this is not a budget that we are recommending in terms of something we would normally propose to move the town forward, but this is a budget in reaction to what is going on in the general world and in our economy, and our goal was to get as close to zero as we could. So what you should have in your packet is an amended FY21 revenue sheet, an amended FY21 budget reduction sheet, an amended FY21 capital budget sheet, and 2 tax commitments, one showing no change in the use of fund balance from what was proposed, and one showing what amount of fund balance would be required in order to get you to zero. So what I'm going to do is take you through those sheets. And Jen is right here. Jen, if you see something we've missed, then speak up. So the first sheet labeled amended revenues from proposed budget for fiscal year 21. These are the budget accounts that Jen and I determined we thought would be impacted due to the change in the economic conditions. So they do not reflect every revenue that you would see in your original proposed budget. What you can see in the columns there are what we proposed in FY21. Then we at the beginning of all of this took a conservative review of how those revenues could be impacted. And then as time went on, I did a more what I'm calling optimistic view of what those revenues, and what Jen and I tried to settle on is where in between those two would be our revised request. So that's what you see in the yellow highlighted column. So certainly excise tax, we have already seen an impact, I would say, in that, but part of it is relative to the fact that people are not being required by law right now to renew their registrations. Most revenue that we have collected in the past year for vehicles, we assume most people will be keeping those vehicles, but those will be depreciated. And so hence our excise revenue will be depreciated as well. We are anticipating that we won't really see an increase in excise tax revenue. In terms of revenue sharing, Kennebunkport, that's the revenue sharing that we get through the state revenue sharing, and under the last administration, the revenue sharing had been diminished to municipalities, and that was now ramping back up. The legislature had agreed to that, and of course, revenue sharing comes from sales tax revenues, and so people had seen an increase in those as well. The 120,000 was a more conservative number that we anticipated for revenue sharing in the new state government budget. But we anticipate that that will change both twofold because of the state's budget issues, but also because of sales tax revenue not being as high. So we have reduced that amount. Clerk fees, building permit fees, plumbing permits, planning board, liquor licenses, victualler licenses, all of those are really related to the business community. And some of those fees are fairly consistent, or building permit fees we increased last year, so some of them will be higher maybe than in years past for that reason. But we are seeing that businesses are struggling, and maybe some businesses that in the past did get a permit, might be challenged in moving forward. And so we think all of those fees will be impacted. Parking violations are a direct result of how much summer traffic we get and Christmas prelude traffic. So that a lot is dependent on both Dock Square area as well as Goose Rocks Beach. And so we have reduced those pretty dramatically, not knowing what that summer season might look like for us, and how much parking will be taking place. Police details are when police are hired for overtime because of either construction projects or usually because of special events. And with some special events already canceled this summer and others questionable into the fall, we are unclear as to how many police details there really will be. And so we reduced that number. Beach stickers is another big question. You see we've reduced that pretty dramatically. And what we are wondering, certainly there is a certain amount of revenue we anticipate that residents will continue to get their beach stickers, but that's a small portion of the overall revenue. A large majority of that revenue is based on daily beach stickers. And so we have reduced that quite a bit. And the question really is, how much beach and whether or not we'll have daily parking this summer. Investment income we had seen increase dramatically, and we had a very good investment agreement with Camden National Bank. we were meeting with them and they were changing the agreement that we currently have in place. But then the interest rates dropped dramatically, and so we are anticipating our investment income will be much smaller this year. And then last is the recreation transfer. So our recreation is both in the general fund budget, and we also have a special revenue budget for recreation. And what happens is, based on their revenues, that we transfer a certain amount from the special revenue fund to the general fund in order to compensate for our salaries in the general fund budget. And a large portion of that revenue comes from summer camp. And we have a lot of concerns about whether summer camp will happen this year and how that will be impacted. So what you can see is the reduction in amended revenues as a reduction based on what we had proposed, not on past years. And that reduction is 485,000. So you can see the percentages underneath that. It is 24% less than these same revenue accounts had been proposed. Not all revenue accounts, but the revenue accounts you see on this sheet. In terms of all revenue accounts that we brought forward, it is a 17% reduction. I would say somewhere in that 12 to 15, 17% range is what we're seeing from other municipalities as well. So it was just a check-in for Jen and I in terms of where we saw ourselves in the greater community. Jen, do you have any comment on that?
Nope, I think you got it.
I've got a question.
David?
Yeah, Dave James. I should know the answer to this, but you don't have Dock Square parking lot revenue there. Is that included someplace else?
Dock Square parking lot is another special revenue fund. And so that is a enterprise fund that the selectmen oversee, but it's not part of the general fund budget.
But isn't that one that is subject to significant reduction if we don't have much of a tourist season?
It would be subject to a reduction, yes, but it's not part of the general fund, so it's not included on this list.
Real quick, Laurie, just because I left everything at home when we came down. What was the net revenue from the Dock Square parking lot last year? Off the top of your head, do you remember?
We take in about 400,000 a year from Dock Square parking lot.
Net?
No, net gross.
Okay.
So the Dock Square parking lot is a budget that the selectmen approve. And so those revenues and expenses stay in their own fund. We transfer 30,000 of it over to cover restrooms, and we transfer over an additional amount to cover the general fund's expenses related to Dock Square parking lot. But it's not a revenue we're concerned with in terms of the reductions here.
Oh, well, okay.
I have a question. Do you really think that the investment income is going to drop that much?
Yes.
Yeah, our previous agreement with Camden was tied to LIBOR, and now that's gone away. So we were seeing anywhere from 2.5% to 3%. Now, under the current one, we're going to get 0.85.
Ouch.
Wow.
And budget board members, could I just ask, identify yourself before you speak, please?
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Question, John Dykstra. Lori, do you, out of the 112.5 for beach stickers, do you know how much of that would be anticipated to be daily stickers? Just on the top of your head, is there a half of it, a quarter of it?
I would say a good portion of it would be, I'm just looking back.
That's what I would think too. I was just curious if that's so.
in another spreadsheet I have. Um, So I would say, I mean, we do get a fair amount that are weekly as well. But the majority of the permits are either daily or residential.
Right,
So
which-
seasonal residential,
Which are $5 as opposed to, you know,
correct,
25 or the 100 for weekly, huh? Yeah,
correct.
okay.
Barbara, I have a question.
Edmund?
Lori, I think all the accounts look good, except maybe the excise tax. That looks like only an 8% reduction. To me, that's very optimistic.
From what we had proposed, we took the reduction from what we actually took in this past fiscal year, which may be the difference. Jen, do you want to speak to that, or?
I can pull up the spreadsheets if you guys want, but yeah, that's how we did it. We looked at what we actually had budgeted for this year and took out
Well,
like
what we've actually taken in versus what we've budgeted is what we did the reduction on, right?
right. And then we took out estimating that we're not going to have as many new vehicles this year coming up.
Yes. I don't see David raising his hand.
He's raising his virtual hand.
Oh, is it? David, did you wish to speak? Dave James?
Well, not
No.
yet. You know, my thinking right
Okay.
now is I'm leaning more toward the conservative estimates than I am toward the optimistic, but let's go through the whole thing.
And I would tell you that I just wanted to show you the process, but Jen and I are quite comfortable with the yellow column.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, you can only estimate based on what you know at this point in time. But we wouldn't bring you a revised request that we weren't both comfortable with at this point in time.
I assume you all saw the article in today's Portland Press Herald by the governor regarding Maine State loss of revenue,
Mhm.
which kind of turned me to thinking that maybe we need to lean toward the conservative side here.
Absolutely.
Just a thought.
Yeah, and I would just remind you that the state's revenues are a bit different, although we're both impacted certainly by the economy. So in terms of the next one, we have phase 1 and phase 2 reductions.
Yep.
And Dimitri just showed up in attendees. Can you move him over, Michelle?
Hey, how you guys?
We're fine, we think.
Feels like I just jumped from one Zoom call to another. That's like
Zoom in.
So Dimitri, we just went over the revenue numbers and we're headed into phase 1, phase 2 reductions.
How do we look?
Well,
Or,
so on the phase 1 reductions list, it says amended FY21 budget. We have put most of these reductions under the department category. There are 2 on the first page that are highlighted in yellow. One of them is regarding online service fees, and that is an addition rather than a subtraction. I described in my memo that as of March, when we had to close the town office down and move everything we did to, or most everything we did to online services, we took away the online service fee for people. And we have now a month in, we have some sense of how that has operated and worked. I am anticipating that as we look at reentry and getting business back online, that we are going to be limited to how many people we can have within town hall at any given time, and that we're really still going to be encouraging people to take part in online services. So I've included the fees in the budget here. This does not include fees for things like paying property taxes. As I said, that would be a large amount of fees to absorb. People can still pay them by taxes. We do get some from escrow companies. The lines are individually noted what they are. When you go down to the bottom of admin, you'll see the ballot machine edition. One issue we've had is thinking about elections in the future. And especially if we're going to have a local ballot, which I believe we'll have in November, we really probably need to add the rental of a ballot machine for that election in order to make it as smooth as possible. So those are two additions. You can see department by department some of these reductions. So for example, under police, something different is dock square officers. So we normally pay for those out of the general fund. Those are the ones that patrol both for parking purposes as well as to assist the general public. And I am looking to transfer those out of the general fund budget and pay for them out of the dock square parking lot budget. So I wouldn't actually be reducing those people. We have looked at reducing the planning and development part-time assistant code officer. So we'd be reducing that person 8 hours a week. We also are combining the fire warden under fire and the E911 officer stipend, both of those stipend positions. The fire chief would be absorbing those duties. You can see under solid waste, we would be postponing recycling until January, and are hoping that we would recoup about $75,000 in savings there. On the second page, we see some additional reductions in individual accounts. We were able to, while this has been going on, contract for propane and heating fuel over the next year. And so since we had put the budget together, we've had about $10,000 in savings because of that reduced contract cost. You'll see that there's one line for capital, and that's a reduction of $550,000, which then relates back to the next capital sheet we'll go over. Under wages, we had an intern planned. That's been reduced. We had some market adjustments planned. Those have been taken out. And we have currently an open sergeant position in the police department. And we're looking to postpone the promotion of a sergeant for another year, and that would be $10,000. So when you tally all these up, you have a total of $720,000 reduction. I then have a list of phase 2 reductions, which are, I would say, less popular. So that would be including a reduction for the River Harbor Master, 4th of July fireworks, freezing the COLA adjustment for all employees until January 1st. And that's a union issue that we're still discussing with the union. It would be asking our partner agencies, CHEMS and the 2 libraries, for a 5% reduction in their requests, taking the $600 from social services that David James offered last time. Reducing our part-time grounds person, so we would not have that individual help us in the summer months. And we have some additional capital reductions. So just before we discuss that, I'm gonna jump you to the next sheet, which is your capital, just because they're tied together.
Laurie,
So in this, yes,
Dave James again. From reading your introductory comments in what you sent out, all of the department heads have essentially, whatever grudgingly or agreeably, agreed to what you're proposing here. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Laurie?
Dan Beard. I don't understand phase 1 and phase 2. Will these be done at the same time? Why did you label them as a phase 1, phase 2?
When we last met, the budget committee and selectmen said, give us 2 budget proposals.
Mhm.
So that's the phasing to me. Phase 1 are the level 1 cuts. Maybe phase isn't the right term, but it's the cuts that would probably, or the reductions in the proposed budget that would be, maybe not easy is the right word, but more palatable. And the phase 2 is where we start getting in deeper, and there are some more challenges associated with those.
It sounds like there'd be union negotiations with the phase 2, at least around the COLA freeze, for example. That would be
Right.
a
So,
process, I would
so
assume.
currently we have a union contract in place, and I've been in discussion with the union about that. And so certainly, they understand the situation we're in. They have some issues as well, and we would need a union vote and a side agreement for that. So that's, a perfect example of that would be a more challenging one.
Laurie, Grace Adams. And I would think with certain things, and they're minor expenses, but say with the fireworks, if we don't have them this year, I would think that can be deferred into next year. Or,
So normally we vote in June for the fireworks. That's another challenge. So keep in mind, and then we vote in June, and then we're spending them pretty much after the
that's second.
start of the
Okay.
year. And so this year, we're not voting until July 18th. And so fireworks have already passed. And so the selectmen could look at their contingency account this fiscal year that we're currently in to fund them. I know Kennebunk is talking about it as well. I think the other question is whether or not, even in a re-entry and reopening plan, whether large gatherings be allowed come July 4th. So that's why that's on the list.
Okay.
Laurie, Sheila?
Yep.
I'm a little concerned about the assistant code enforcement officer. Summer is the big build around here. That's when all the activity happens. Do you think we really need to put him down to 12 hours? I mean, that concerns me for that department. And I would not, and I know this is not going to go over with everybody, but I think in curbside pickup for recycling could wait until next July.
Grace Adams, Laurie. I'm glad Sheila brought it up, because I was going to preface it with, I believe in global warming, we recycle, but since we haven't had it since September, and it wouldn't be a big shocker for people if we deferred it to 2022, I guess, that might be a big help for the budget.
I mean, that's $75,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
David James here. I disagree with that comment. I don't know how many of you take your recycling up to the Kennebunk recycling area up there, but they've raised the price from $5 per bin to $7 per bin. I go up there every 2 weeks because that's about when my 2 bins get filled up. And that's $28 a month times 12. So I'm paying $300 a month a year to take my recycling up there.
Mhm.
And I'm not gonna continue to do that if we don't get back to doing curbside recycling. And I think
Okay,
there's a lot of
fine.
people that fall in that category.
And.
Well, that's your
it's great.
prerogative. That is
Yeah,
your
I see.
prerogative, David.
That's what?
Kai Leffler, Kai Leffler. Kai
Kai,
Leffler.
Kai, go
I
ahead.
wanted to go back to the part-time code enforcement officer. There must be some background, Lori, that you all know, but that's a 40% reduction in that person's income. That seems a little unfair to me. And, you know, it's not just summer. A lot of building here at Goose Rocks all winter long. And so I just, that and the fairness of it, and that there's other things, you know, I'm like Sheila, it might not be popular. I'd rather see you put the libraries in phase 1 and that person in phase 2, or not at all. If the union would allow the COLA to be extended to February 1, that would almost cover that position. So I don't know, just unfair to me. And I think we still need that person.
Grace Adams again. I hope I'm not talking over anyone because of the connection. And I mean, I think we should do everything in our power not to cut anyone's hours or income and not to raise taxes. There's cuts we can make in other places.
Dimitri, did you wish to speak?
Oh, no,
No?
just
No,
sort
okay.
of seconding that. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of unpopular things, but before we ding anyone and their income, we should look at what we can do for that. That feels like the timing of it, just that alone makes it really, really unseemly in terms of, like, you know, broader public perceptions. So, yeah.
Steve?
Lori, Steve Turner, I have a question. The maybe 2 budget meetings ago, talking about coordinating some costs and maybe some revenue share with Kennebunk and other communities. When you were having your discussions with the other communities as far as their budget, revised budgets, were there any shared expenses that you could possibly share with other communities to lessen our cost?
You know, we always look at what we're doing and what other communities are doing, and we do, I'd say, a fair amount of sharing. Currently, it doesn't make it to your level because we don't need an interlocal agreement, but in terms of shared spending and bidding and things like that, we do that. There are none at this time, and because everybody else is in a different place with their budget, it's in terms of timeline, it's making it a little more challenging, I would say, to coordinate additional things as other towns are trying to figure out what this means for them. In terms of the part-time position, you know, I want to be clear that I didn't propose any of these in the current budget, okay? So this is when life gets more challenging, okay? And you can't meet all your needs when maybe the paycheck has been reduced, and the town is no different. And so in terms of the part-time code officer, he is part-time because he is efficient at his work, and he is certainly a valued member of our team, but he's also retired. This is his second career now, or third career. And so he is, looking to certainly support the team. And I would not say it's going to be a really challenging financial issue for him per se. But we are trying to find the best ways in which we can still provide the work, but at a reduced expense.
Well, I would think it would be very difficult for that department during the summer not to have at least that half-time person. But anyway, you guys, you know what you're doing. You've already discussed it. I'm just thinking it's the summertime is when so much happens. So that's all.
Unless you live at Goose Rocks.
I mean, I guess the flip side to that is whether or not this summer we'll see the level of activity that we've seen in prior years. And, you know, if people are going to be, you know, sort of making those outlays and investments into either new constructions or renovations or anything like that, I'm not sure. I don't know. I think, you know, if I were a betting man, I'd say we'd see some kind of slowdown, but, you know, yet to see.
Thank you, Dave.
Dave James, again, I'd like to remind you what Laurie said earlier, that the department heads, including Werner Gilliam, have all agreed to what these proposed reductions are. And I'm sure they've taken into consideration what they think might be going to happen relative to their workload.
Dan Beard.
That's a good point.
I have a question. With our GIS mapping, where are we and why do we need that much more on top of what we already have?
So the GIS mapping is a live tool. The only reason GIS works is because you're constantly updating the data. It's also the way we do our tax maps now. So if you think of in the old days, we used to have big printed maps and we'd hire somebody to come in and physically change those maps and make us new printed maps. So now it's done through the GIS database, and all of those various layers that we have within the database need to get updated annually.
Okay.
So are we ready to move to capital?
Sure.
Yes.
Here we are.
So on your amended capital budget, we have all of the capital requests. So this was everything that was in your originally proposed budget. You'll see in that first column. So whereas the revenue sheet only had the revenues I was concerned about, this includes all the capital requests. So in amended phase 1, if it has a little line through it, that means there's 0 now being requested for that. And the third column shows that reduction. And then I have made a notes column to show what that is. So for reductions, the historical preservation of records, we put in $5,000 a year for that. We have taken that money out. I had requested monies for a reserve for town hall. Those have been taken out. Currently, the cameras for the police station need to be replaced that create safety around that building. Those are still in there, as is one of the police cruiser replacements. In the communications, the radios are $250,000, and if you guys haven't gotten a presentation on this, we haven't done capital with you, but if you'd like some more information on that radio replacement, we can bring in Chief Sanford, but it's basically about $1 million project, maybe $1.2 million. And we think that our current infrastructure, which is the tower and our radios that deal with public safety, can last us maybe another 3 years. I mean, it's a question mark. And so what I'm looking to do is put some monies aside to get us to where we need to be in a couple of years. We currently don't have service or very good service at Goose Rocks Beach or in Dock Square. And we're looking at how a network of radio towers and repeaters, as well as the radio equipment itself for all public safety personnel, needs to be upgraded. Sorry, I clicked on a button and now I've lost you all.
We're still here.
Bye.
No such luck.
There you are.
Don't touch your buttons.
I didn't think I was.
That's what you keep telling me. Don't touch your buttons.
My computer is just like a man, very sensitive. So next down we have fire, and in fire we have 3 accounts that we had proposed funding for. The first was equipment And the equipment is for those SCBA air bottles. So we've been putting a reserve aside with the plan in a few years to replace all those. They will be at the end of their life cycle. And you can see that I reduced funding there in phase 1 so that we're only putting 20 instead of 35 away. The building improvements we had planned for the fire station in the proposed budget, we were going to do a reserve there as well. I've taken that reserve out. For the apparatus reserve, that's the reserve we put in each year to let us buy new fire trucks. We had planned another truck replacement in a few years. And so I'm reducing rather than taking away that entire amount. So we would only put 100,000 into reserve. On the highway department, we have a fuel system that really needs to be replaced, and I've kept that in there because that is what fuels all town vehicles, and it tracks the fuel. So it's a safety and security measure as well. On the vehicles, we are planning on having a reserve for half of what it will take to replace our tandem axle large truck, so that we would replace it the following budget year. So I have reduced that reserve as well. Potentially we'll make that up, or it might take longer to purchase it. On the road improvements, we had originally budgeted 344,000, and that's been reduced by 114,000 to 230. That means that we wouldn't have the drainage project on School Street, which was associated with the school, and I think with their budget issues, that'll be a challenge for them as well. It means we would not pave River Road or Walker's Lane, and there was $1,000 for gravel for Fairfield Hill, which we'll probably just take from our operational gravel that we have. So that would reduce that by 114. The sidewalk and drainage construction was related to Wiles district, and that has had a lot of construction. And so even though it says sidewalk, it's really about the expansion of shoulders and drainage there rather than a curb sidewalk. And it's directly related to the paving project that we had planned last year's budget and this year's. So I kept it in. The recreation had a few different projects that were all related to their capital reserve account, and they do have funds in reserve. We were going to add $5,000, and so part of that was to fund a tennis court resurfacing project. So that would mean $5,000 won't get you a tennis court, just so you know, but I was going to add to that, and so we would not be doing that. Street lights, our plan is to purchase our street lights back from Central Maine Power, and that is going to be a reduction in our operating budget. And in fact, our operating budget that we've asked for anticipates that we will have the street lights purchased. If we didn't move forward with this, I'd have to increase the operating budget. And then our Cape Porpoise Pier, you can see, is added to that. So the pier is having some infrastructure challenges, and so we really need to be doing some work soon. I've actually added 50,000 to this because I am in hopes that we can attract some state and federal money, especially federal money that might be related to the economic stimulus package. And so I want to make sure that we're in good stead to meet whatever matches that may allow us to gain additional revenue during this challenging time. So those are the reductions for phase 1. And you can see that the reduction amount totals 550,000, which you saw in your first sheet. Phase 2, I would take out the police vehicle. I would eliminate the SCBA reserve, and I would take the public works vehicle down another $10,000. And that brings us down another 61,000, and that 61,000 is in your phase 2 reduction. So if people want more information on some of these capital projects, I would ask that we bring in department directors. So I'll stop here.
Lori, I've got a question about the radio equipment, the 250,000, whether that can be phased in, or if there's pieces that can be done and not, if it's not completely related to each other.
Yeah, can we bring Craig Sanford in?
Hello.
Dave,
Craig, can you just talk to people about the radio project, since we didn't get to do the whole communications budget presentation, and people have questions about the phasing and when that needs to happen and things like that.
Okay, so the radio project involved the entire town. A rundown version, we had a committee come together that was fire department, police department, highway, sewer, and EMS. And we discussed our downfalls and our shortcomings. We are experiencing our radios that are up there in age that they're not even produced anymore, so they are unrepairable. We had our vendor come in and we did a big project and went over everything and came up with a recommendation that was originally in the budget. And it was a phased in approach. But at the beginning, it was definitely tough for us because of reception issues. I can't talk to a police officer on his portable in Dock Square, nor down at Goose Rocks Beach. So we had to add areas that we might suit our needs as far as antennas. So I do agree that we could do this in a phased-in approach, and that's what the plan had happened. But it wouldn't do us any good to do, like, let's say, buy radios now. They're not going to work any better. So we kind of got to do the project as needed when it happens.
So the plan was to put this money aside and add to it in the next 2 years in order to really make the project come to life.
I'm comfortable with that.
Same here.
So am I.
me too.
Okay.
No further questions from the budget board members?
No, if the chief's fine with it,
Thank you.
I am.
Okay, Chief, you can go back to attendee level.
You're being demoted.
So then you should have 2 sheets in your packet. And I'm going to do the first one is called FY21 amended budget, no change in fund balance, FY21 tax commitment. So this is the no change in fund balance tax commitment. It should have 2 yellow highlighted lines right at the top of the page. So this is similar to the tax commitment sheet that you had in your original budget. The problem is we have a lot of information that Jen and I were trying to simplify as much as possible. And so what you're seeing on this tax commitment is in the far left-hand column, you're seeing FY20, the year we're currently in, and what was approved. Then you're seeing the next 3 columns are all related to the original proposed budget. So you can see that's what we proposed. The difference column is related to the difference between FY21 and FY20. And then the next gray box is phase 1. So remember those phase 1 reductions? Some of them are in the municipal operations line. That's why those 2 lines are highlighted. Those are the only ones that have changed in this scenario. And some are related in the capital. So if you were to say, well, Laura, you decreased capital by 550,000, but phase 1 difference doesn't show that. It's because phase 1 difference is showing the difference between this new amended budget and FY20. Not what we proposed, but last fiscal year, or the year we're in. Then in the next set of columns, you have phase 2. And that's implementing those further reductions both in capital and operations. So you can see at the bottom, we put the municipal portion of the mill rate. If we just continue down, you'll see that the revenues were decreased based on what we had anticipated. And then the net total commitment, you can see decreases. Our valuation stays the same. And the tax rate changes. And so in the box below, you have the municipal portion of the mill rate. And you can see that that went down in phase 1 and it went a little further down in phase 2. Okay? But all we did in this is we changed the phase reductions and we also reduced the revenues in the non-property tax revenue by what we had in the highlighted revenue sheet that we went over first. Okay? In the next, yeah.
Question, Laurie.
Dave James.
Yes, Dave James. Do we have any indication of whether York County and the Education Department, RSU 21, are going to make reductions in these budgets?
So,
I would hope so.
I don't know. The budget, the school board, I should say, is meeting right now. So as you are meeting, the school board is meeting and they're reviewing their budget. I have communicated where we are with our budget and in hopes that they will partner with us in these times.
Okay, but no feedback yet.
They're meeting tonight, so.
Okay. Thank you.
The staff have given them reduction sheets, just like you have two different sets of reductions. And the finance committee has met on those, but the school board has not, and tonight's the first night. In terms of the county, I haven't gotten any feedback from the county.
Is there any chance that we'll have some indication before we have to take a final vote on this to meet your May 15th deadline?
You might get some by after tonight's meeting about what way they're leaning, or we might get none. I don't know.
Any indication on, whether or not they're looking to at least come in below what I would have assumed was originally an increase?
I think that they have proposed a $500,000 reduction and $1 million reduction. They were originally looking at $1.5 million reduction as well.
Okay.
But I think in tonight's meeting, they're looking at those two proposals. And I think that there is a continuum of viewpoints.
Very diplomatic. Right?
So on the next sheet, you'll see our tax commitment, and this time we've highlighted the general use of fund balance. So this one's called increase in fund balance contribution to reflect a 0% increase. So in this one, the operations and the capital and the revenue are all the same as they are in the first one. You can see that you have the original proposed budget, a phase 1 budget, and a phase 2 budget. What we have done is, you can see that this past year we contributed $200,000 from our fund balance. This fiscal year, I was proposing $200,000 from the fund balance, as well as $325,000 from our capital projects use of fund balance. And so what my goal here was, on the bottom where it says municipal portion of the mill rate, is that we would get to a 0 increase there. So we were at $3.20 in FY20, and we would want to see $3.20 in FY21, both in phase 1 and phase 2. So the fund balance becomes the plug number of how you get there. And you will see that in phase 1, it would require a $600,000 contribution from fund balance. And in phase 2, it would require a $440,000 reduction in fund balance.
Wow.
So Jen and I could have run you 100 different spreadsheets that would have given you all kinds of different options, but those are kind of the two parameters. And certainly we can answer questions about this.
Dave James, Lori, I think you and Jen have done a fantastic job with the department heads. And looking at the first proposal, you've done just what we asked you to do, which was to get the dollar net municipal commitment and dollar amount down from 10.8% to something less than 5%. And in your phase one, you've got it down to 7.1%, and phase two, you've got it down to 4.53%. But that still leaves us with a municipal portion of the mill rate that's at 3.7% higher than a 0%. Whereas in your second sheet, using the general use of fund balance, you've reduced that municipal mill rate to a 0% increase. So it's a very clear presentation. I go back to the question of, it would sure help if I had some idea if the York County and RSU 21 were going to do something to reduce the mill rate further, because that might be important making a decision on this.
Grace?
Yes, okay, so, and I think David just explained it and Laurie did. So phase one and phase two do not affect the fund balance, right? Which is,
Sure.
Yeah.
Phase
Okay.
1 and 2 are just reductions to expenses.
I see,
The
okay,
contribution to the fund balance could be done or not done with either phase.
all righty. And,
Basically, we don't get to zero with either of those, Grace, but we'll have
okay.
to kick in some
Lowers
of
the
our
mill
fund
rate.
balance.
All right, thank you. And, going back to what David just said, I guess we're gonna know when we know, as far as the state goes.
Are we voting on this tonight?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think we're ready.
Actually,
I don't think
Well,
it's,
I need to know, I mean, my goal would be that we could get direction from you about where you would like to see the budget and what things you're willing to accept or not accept. And I would like to see some votes on that, because we need to then prepare all the budgetary documents and the warrant, and you have to vote on your recommendations on those. And I can't proceed without knowing where we're headed.
So
Okay.
what you'd like to see is with us to come forward, whether we like phase one or phase two. Is that correct?
okay,
Or you could say, I like this, but I don't like that. I mean,
Right.
it's really up to you, but we're looking for some direction. I mean, Jen, what do you think?
I agree. I think that just to get a feel for what you guys are looking at, what you like, what you don't like, so we can move forward a little bit more, would be appreciated.
Could I, just a thought, John Dykstra?
John?
It seems the difference between phase 1 and phase 2, as you mentioned, is they're more pain level 1 and pain level 2, huh? But at either case, if getting down to a 0 increase of the mill rate, then the only question I see is how much we're willing to take out of the fund balance to get the mill rate to 0. It's a $200,000 difference, or 160,000, whatever the number is, between phase 1 and phase 2. And at $600,000, do I recall that the capital fund, or not using the right word, the fund balance is on the order of 4 million and some? So we're talking a 10 or a 12% reduction in that principal, correct?
Yes.
So really, you've got two levels of pain, but you're still going to end up with 0 as far as a tax increase. It's how much we're willing, a 10% draw or a 12% draw in this time of emergency,
which is at least one of the reasons for the fund balance.
Nicely explained.
Yes.
Barbara, I have a comment. Lori, if I could,
Yeah, sure, Stedman.
as long as I don't cut out, my computer keeps freezing, so hopefully I can get through this. But my opinion is, I'm very happy with the one that uses the $400,000 for fund balance. Basically, you've got a 2% increase in the mill rate, which is only 19 cents. None of that coming from the town. So I'm not sure we can do any better than that. We have to see how this thing goes. We can always, have special town meetings throughout the year, depending on the situation. I'm wondering if the selectmen have gotten any feedback from the townspeople. My concern is paying their taxes. How have the taxes been coming in compared to a year ago for, let's say, the last 10, 12 weeks? And what's it look like about paying taxes?
Well, certainly nobody has come out and said, "Oh, I want my taxes to go up." But I do agree with you, Stedman. I like your train of thought. I think what we miss here is that there's a lot of uncertainty financial here coming out, and it's been said that we're a wealthy community, but not everybody in this community is wealthy, and that I think the prudent thing to do is to show our taxpayers that one of our major concerns is full responsibility, and I think that phase 2 with a $440,000 input from the capital reserve, from the reserve, is a fiscally responsible thing to do.
I agree with you, Ed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara Barwise here, and I agree with Ed because I agree that not all of us are wealthy, and some of us are a lot less wealthy now. So I would say that rather you've lost your job or losing your investments.
Or your income.
Mhm,
Yeah.
Or your income.
So what do
There's
you,
been nothing since January.
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
what do you
it's
think,
great.
Sheila? What do you think about which
You know,
phase do you like?
I don't mind the phase 1. I don't mind that. And I don't mind using $600,000.
I
I
agree.
think, it's an emergency fund, and I can't imagine if there's going to be another worse emergency than this. I don't want to be a selectman.
There you go.
But I mean, that's what it's for. And
Yeah.
the other thing I worry about is the union. And if we go to phase 2, do we have to force the union to accept the fact that they're not going to get a raise until January? Or, what if they don't agree to it? If we just keep with phase 1, we don't have to deal with that. And I think, I just think we're better off with just phase 1.
I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah, Chris Adams, I agree too.
Dave James, I just, again, like to point out that there's no way we're going to get to a flat mill rate unless we use a portion of the fund balance.
Absolutely.
And
Agreed.
if you look at the second chart that Lori presented, we don't have to go to phase 2 because phase 1 actually holds us at the 3.20 mill rate. So you use
Exactly.
that, you've got phase 1 with use of endowment funds.
Exactly.
That's what I like. I agree.
So what about you, Pat?
Yeah, I just listening to the back and forth and the pros and cons. And, I want to make sure I understand the innuendos and what may or may not be. But I don't have any problem with the phase 1 and leaving it at that way. And we'll do 600,000. And I think it's something that we need to be mindful of. So if we can show responsibility, this is the way to do it.
Okay. So I happen to agree right now with phase 1 also. I hate
Phase 1.
to take the 600,000. I was hoping more like 500, but I think that now's the time to be able to use that and get it done right and hopefully move on.
Well, we
Well,
could always
Alan-
split the
Kai
difference.
Leffler with the budget board.
Kai, go ahead.
I'm concerned that we're all, Laura, you and Jen, everybody's done a wonderful job. None of us know what's really going to happen. They're talking about another wave of this thing this fall and maybe next year. I personally would like to see us go to phase 2, because if everybody can keep a job, you know, I know about all of the negotiations, and the union may not agree to that, but I would rather cut back now and then not have to go battling in next January, February time when we've got some other crisis going on. I'm like you, I'd rather not take 600 out of the fund balance because we might have to visit there again. You know, I personally would like to see us go with phase 2 myself.
Dan Beard, I would agree with Kai.
Okay, Pat,
What does that mean? Not to use fund balance?
No, no.
No,
Use
go
less-
phase
use
2
less.
on expenditures and modify the fund balance withdrawal. Just do the 440,
Yes.
500, like Alan said. Some number in between, save some money for a rainy day.
well, I have a question for Laurie, if you will. It has to do with, in the event we go with phase 1, say, and we get to, say, the end of the year and things are looking more dire than we expected, and there's a need for a further cut, is there any flexibility or any way we could use part of or what's in phase 2 to make the difference up? I mean, where does flexibility lie?
So when town meeting authorizes expenditures, they're authorizing you to spend up to. So that means you could certainly reduce spending, keeping in mind that quite a bit of our spending is related to supplies for winter, maintenance of roads, or preparing financial documents, so tax bills and things like that. But a large portion of it is people. So what you would be looking at is a people reduction, probably.
Well, that's why we looked at having a salary reduction, trying to keep the people. Isn't that true?
Yeah. Right,
But that's not a guarantee either.
Nothing is guaranteed.
right.
Yeah,
So if you take the salary reduction and you end up at the end of the year and it's much worse than you had expected, and you have to cut people, you're going to be, I think, at that point, cutting fewer people than you would if you didn't take the salary reduction. Is that logic there?
Are you
So
asking
is-
me or?
Well,
Have you heard back from the union at all as any indication as to whether they were in agreement or a non-agreement? Or have they even talked about it?
So the union has talked about it and we are in discussions about it. I told them about my phased approach and I told them that I would be discussing it with you tonight. And so I don't want to get into union negotiations in a Zoom meeting, but you know, it is something that needs to be negotiated.
Okay.
Grace Adams, and again, I've said it before, I want to keep people working and I don't want to see taxes. And we can make cuts other places. Hopefully, we won't have to go to salary reductions or layoffs or anything like that.
Right.
John Dyke,
That's way down the road as far as I'm concerned, that part.
Go ahead, John.
again, Laurie, as I understand it, what the warrant will do is it'll put a ceiling on the maximum we can spend. We can always spend less. So I would argue to go with phase 1. That gives us the most revenue in Laurie's hands. And then if we have to come back, then we can.
So is
So
there,
the only thing is we would commit taxes based on that. So you would be looking at a tax bill, whether we whether taxes didn't come in as much, but I just want to be clear. When they authorize it, that's what we'll commit against.
I certainly think we could cut the solid waste budget completely out for FY21. I know that may not be popular with some of you, but even if we delayed it to January, I don't think that's really a good time to roll out curbside in the middle of winter.
Actually, I think that's a decision I would agree could be made then, and that would be one thing you would look at if you needed to do it. I would hesitate to cut that now going in, but that would certainly be a place you would look if things were on the bad side and the downside. A lot of
Agreed.
places we can look.
Yeah.
You're talking about cutting out just the recycle, right? Excuse me, John?
That's what I was talking about, just recycling.
Ed,
Yeah.
and I agree with Ed there.
Yeah. And please don't misunderstand me that I don't think this is important, because, I was kind of up on the air, and then John and his team did such a wonderful job in their research and presentations to us throughout the year that I'm fully sold on the idea. But again, nobody saw any of this coming, and recycling has seemed to have gone by the wayside in our communities anyways, because I went to take my recyclable or reusable bags to Hannaford the other day, and they looked at me like I had 6 heads and said, "You can't bring those in here because they're not safe," and gave me plastic bags to take out.
Oh, is there, what I'm hearing,
Ed, that's a good point.
And then you see people taking disposable rubber gloves and throwing them on the ground. So I don't think, sadly, that recycling's on very many people's minds right now.
Oh, I think it is. I
I
hear it all
disagree
the
with that.
time, all the time.
I totally disagree with that, but that's
I hear it all the time.
Hi, Leffler. Bill and I are like Dave James. We're over there spending $20-something every few weeks.
Yeah, I hear it all the time. It's
Yeah.
not, I think we'd be penny wise and pound foolish to take that out, and just leave it in phase 1. If something happens at the end, then we can always adjust down.
And there's a lot of different places you can look, not just the recycling when that time comes.
Yep.
And being an optimist, maybe we have a summer, people want to get out and they want to come up here, and maybe we'll, have as good a year as we had last year. I mean, we don't know.
Well, they'll absolutely want to come. It's a matter of, is it safe to have them come is the question.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
so is there any Board of Selectmen that would like to make a motion for a budget recommendation at this time?
I'll recognize that we go with phase 1.
I will second that.
Okay.
Phase 1 with
$600,
$600,000.
600,000, excuse me.
Yes,
Right.
So, Mike, could you say that again?
I recommend we go with phase 1 proposed budget.
With or without the increase in use of endowment funds, Mike? They're 2 different cases.
I said phase 1.
No, but
Phase 1 applies to both cases.
No, there are,
Okay, and using the $600,000.
Okay,
Okay, that's important.
okay, that's your motion. Who's,
Phase 1 does not,
that.
is not, all you need to say is phase 1. It's got the 600,000 in it. But if you want to specify that, we can do it.
I'm with
yes,
you.
I'd like that would be, that's
Yeah.
great.
We'll do
Okay,
it.
okay, so is there a second?
I seconded it.
Sheila seconds it.
That's right.
Okay, we're gonna take a call here. All right, Sheila,
Aye.
Ed,
Well, as my goal was to hold the municipal increase at 0, aye.
Pat,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Alan says aye. 5-0, motion carries.
All
How
right.
about you, Barbara?
The budget board, I'll entertain a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to, Grace Adams, I'll make a motion that we go with phase 1, $600,000 taken from, from the fund balance.
Thank you.
That's it.
Second,
Who seconded?
John.
Aye.
Michelle, thank you, Michelle. Okay, and I will take the roll call. Grace Adams,
Aye.
John Dykstra,
Aye.
Dan Baird,
No.
Dave Betsis,
No.
Alan Evelyn,
Aye.
David James,
Aye.
Kai Leffler,
No.
Steve Turner,
Aye.
Dimitri Michaud,
Aye.
Michelle Powell, Stedman Seavey,
You're muted.
Stedman. Stedman's mute. Stedman?
Aye.
Thank you. And Barbara Barwise is aye. We have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. 9 yeses and 3 nos. It passes. Phase 1, and that's the phase 1.
Any more comments, Lori?
So, I appreciate everybody's time and energy tonight. I know this is challenging. If people after the meeting have questions about what we all decided or talked about, give me a call. What we can do is, Jen and I will get to work on, with Tracy at developing warrant articles. And what I would like to do is bring forward to you things that you can actually vote for a recommendation for a town warrant for next week. And what that will, and I sent you an email saying what the categories I was going to lump them into. So, for example, all public safety would be one category. I mean, certainly it'll have that detail of the budget, but you know what it was like to roll call vote tonight. And if I had 70 articles or 50 articles, you'd be here for a couple of days roll call voting. So,
Wow.
we have
FaceTime.
right. We have housekeeping articles on the warrant as well. So remember, it's not just those budget lines.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Dan Beard to Lori and Jen, thank you for a good.
A great job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Here, here, here,
Great
here.
job.
Yeah.
Any further comments from the budget board members?
No, agree with Dan. They did a great job. Arlene too.
Yes, oh, everyone,
To
and
adjourn.
including department
Everyone.
heads and members.
Department heads, everyone.
Yeah,
Motion
it's
to
right.
adjourn, Barbara.
Thank you very much,
Second, Dave.
David. Second,
Second.
okay. Grace Adams, move to adjourn. Grace,
Move to adjourn, move to adjourn.
John Dykstra,
Aye.
Dan Baird,
Aye.
David Betsis,
Aye.
Alan Evelyn,
Aye.
David James,
Yeah, aye.
Kai Leffler,
Aye.
Steve Turner,
Aye.
Dimitri Michaud, Michelle Powell, Michelle, Stedman Seavey,
Aye.
and Barbara Barway says aye. We're all in agreement to adjourn. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank-
budget board.
Thank you. Thank
Barbara.
you.
Everyone.
And we want to thank Michelle for pinch hitting tonight.
Yes.
Yay.
Yes, thanks,
Hey.
Michelle.
God, Michelle.
Double duty.
So
And Steve for taking the minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
we're gonna go on to other business.
we are.
Yeah. Sheila,
No.
I have no other business.
Ed,
Oh, you know what?
Oh, that other
wait a
business,
minute.
no, I have none.
what do you have?
We met, or I met this afternoon with the hospitality group, and we're meeting again on Wednesday to bring in everybody's ideas on how to open up the town and go get ahead. And I'll be reporting information to you as soon as I get it.
Okay.
That's it.
Ed, do you have any?
No, I don't. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah. Pat,
Nothing, Alan.
Mike,
Nothing.
I have nothing. Lori, anything else that you want to say before we close the meeting?
Town staff and officials are working on reentry plans through their committees as well as the Goose Rock Speech Committee. So certainly we'll have more information coming forward on all of that as well.
Thank you.
Super.
So-
Alan, I move we adjourn.
I have a first,
Second,
Third.
Ed moved the motion. Sheila seconded. Okay, Sheila,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Pat,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Alan says aye. We're adjourned. Thank you very much for coming. We had a great time.
Good job.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Thanks.